Hello, good evening and welcome to the news on NTA International, reaching you live from Abuja, Nigeria's capital city. I'm Chimobi Walter Naji. Let's take the headlines. Remains of late Chief of Staff to the President laid to rest. Nigerians eulogize the virtues of late Bukhari. Armed Forces of Nigeria neutralizes Boko Haram terrorist and destroys logistics facility. Many thanks for being with us. Now, the remains of the late Chief of Staff to the President, Bukhari, have been laid to rest at Gudu Cemetery in Abuja, the nation's capital. A statement by the presidency says the event, which took place after funeral prayers, marks the end of all ceremonies in respect to the loss in view of the social distancing protocol now in place. State House correspondent Dr Moten Ray reports on the lessons to be learned from Bukhari's death from coronavirus.
People just sitting in the offices, oil and gas, banking, insurance, making so much money for themselves and leaving 180 million people behind. It is not possible to go on that risk.
Indeed, Malam Bukhari, Chief of Staff to the President, is no more. He died Friday night from COVID-19. The late Chief of Staff was tested positive for the disease shortly after his return from Germany, where he represented Nigeria to meet with officials of Siemens on the expansion program of the nation's power sector. Malam carries passion for a prosperous Nigeria and indeed loyalty to President Muhammadu Buhari, many say were never in doubt.
Hate him, love him, but you can't question his loyalty to his boss. His loyalty to his boss was unquestionable, was unnegotiable, and he was literally the punching bag. And he bore stoically all the insults, all the accusations, malicious concoctions, and dubious aspersions on his person. He was a great stoic man.
He had the interest of this country at heart, and he was able to make whatever sacrifice was necessary for this country. Great loyalty and unimpeachable integrity. And for years and years and years to come, people will realize just what impact he has made. And in his loss, we will now begin to see exactly how important he was.
We worked together. He was my editor in the newspaper industry, and we worked very closely. He's a very hard-working person, honest, sometimes temperamental, but for our cause. And many people misunderstood Abba, and may God forgive him and give him Al-Jannah Firdausi. We lost.
But what lessons are there to learn from the demise of the Chief of Staff to the President, Malam Bukhari, from the novel coronavirus? A question posed by NTA News to the Chairman, Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 and Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa.
One of the key lessons for me is that this thing is real and it has come home. How closer can it be to us than this? And that's what I keep saying, that we should not play with this issue. It's not a joke. It has come to ravage our people, ravage our health, and ravage our wealth as a nation. So we must take it more seriously. And the advisories that have gone out there about social distancing, about staying at home, they are not punitive. And I continue to emphasize that they are not punitive. They are meant for our good. So it's a big lesson that our people should not play jokes with this.
In a statement by Malam Garba Shehu, the presidency says no condolence visits will be allowed, but people are instead advised to pray for the repose of the soul of the late Chief of Staff. And for those that can utilize the window permitted for movement in the FCT, a condolence register will be opened at the SGF office from Sunday. From the State House, Adamu Sambu, NTA News.
And President Muhammadu Buhari has described late Abba Kyari as the very best of his cabinet. In a statement by Garba Shehu, the senior special assistant to the president, says the president recalls the enormous sacrifices and contributions made by the deceased to the success of his politics and administration and to the overall development of the nation. Garba Shehu says the president will not be available for condolence visitors, but urges in place of that prayers be offered for the repose of the soul of the departed chief of staff. President Buhari therefore directs strict observance of the social distancing rules as prescribed by the National Center for Disease Control, the Federal Ministry of Health, and other safe hygiene practices as advised by relevant local authorities. Vice President Yemi Osinbajo SAN and wife Dodlakbo have expressed their sympathies to the President, Mrs. Kulu Kyari, the children and members of the family of the passing late Malam Abba Kyari, Chief of Staff to the President. In a statement signed by Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, Laolu Akonde, the Vice President prayed the Lord to comfort and be with them all. In the same vein, members of the Federal Executive Council condoled with President Buhari and members of the Abba Kyari family on the demise of the Chief of Staff of the President. A statement signed by the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, says Abba Kyari served the nation diligently and was a loyal, committed and focused public officer that the Federal Executive Council will miss his service to the nation. And President Muhammadu Buhari received several messages of condolences from foreign and national leaders over the death of Abba Kyari, his late Chief of Staff. A statement by Garba Shehu, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, says President Buhari received telephone calls from President Nana Akufo-Addo of Ghana and President Muhammadu Yusufu of Niger Republic, ex-President Yayi Boni of Benin Republic, and two former Nigerian heads of state, Generals Yakubu Gowon and Abdul Salami Abubakar, called for condolences with President Muhammadu Buhari. The President also received similar messages of condolence from the embassies of friendly countries including Egypt, Chad and Liberia. Messages were also received from governors, traditional and religious leaders, legislators, among other sympathizers. Notable Nigerians have eulogized the late Abba Kyari, who died on Friday. Onengia Fifes put the package together for us.
President of the Senate, Ahmed Lawan, has received with shock and sadness the news of the passing on of the Chief of Staff to the President, Malam Abba Kyari. The Senate President condoled with President Muhammadu Buhari over the loss of Malam Kyari, a very competent, dedicated and loyal aide who was a pillar in his administration. Meanwhile, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila, has described as shocking and sad the passing away of the Chief of Staff to the President, Malam Abba Kyari, and that Kyari would be remembered for his selfless and dedicated service to Nigeria, noting that Kyari died while serving the country as he contracted the disease during his trip to Germany in March on a national assignment. Similarly, the All Progressives Congress mourns the death of Malam Abba Kyari, Chief of Staff and one of the closest advisors to President Muhammadu Buhari. The party, in a statement by its National Publicity Secretary, Lanre Isonilu, says the APC remember late Abba Kyari as a cerebral Nigerian who excelled in his private dealings, professional endeavors and public service. Also, the People's Democratic Party has described the death of the Chief of Staff to the President, Malam Abba Kyari, as depressing and saddening. A statement from the party's National Publicity Secretary, Kola Ologbodinyan, comforts President Muhammadu Buhari, the Kyari family, the government and people of Borno State, and the nation at large for this painful loss and prays that the Almighty Allah grants Malam Abba Kyari eternal rest. The Nigeria Labour Congress has also condoled with President Muhammadu Buhari and the entire family of late Malam Abba Kyari, former Chief of Staff to the President. A condolence message by the NLC President Ayuba Waba to the Secretary to the Government of the Federation on behalf of the Congress says the news of the demise of Malam Abba Kyari is unfortunate, arising from COVID-19 complications. Meanwhile, former President Olusegun Obasanjo has communicated with President Muhammadu Buhari over the death of his Chief of Staff, Abba Kyari. The former president in a statement said he received the news with great sadness. The other statesman described Abba Kyari's death as painful, not only to President Muhammadu Buhari, his family and friends, but to all Nigerians. Onengiye Fine Face, NTA News.
And the late chief of staff to the president was a key figure in the present administration's cabinet before he, in this report, Adebola Brooksland Sunday, takes a look at the life and times of the man, Abba Kyari.
Late Abba Kyari, a Kanuri man from Borno State, means many things to many people from different strata who he had contact with at one time or the other. A disciplined technocrat and politician par excellence, Abba Kyari had his early education in Bama, Borno State, before proceeding to St. Paul's College, now Kufena College, in Wusasa Zaria, Kaduna State. Late Abba Kyari graduated with a bachelor's degree in sociology from the University of Warwick and also received a bachelor's degree in law from the University of Cambridge in 1983. Where he also obtained a master's degree in law in 1984. He was called to the Nigerian bar after attending the Nigerian Law School. He later attended the International Institute for Management Development in Lucerne, Switzerland, and participated in the program for management development at the Harvard Business School in 1992 and 1994. Malam Kyari worked for the law firm Fane Kayode and Showe Mimo. Between 1990 and 1995, he served as a commissioner for forestry and animal resources in Borno State. He was the secretary to the board of African International Bank Limited. Before his appointment as a chief executive officer of the United Bank for Africa, he was an executive director in charge of management services. In 2002, he was appointed a director of Unilever Nigeria and also later served on the board of ExxonMobil Nigeria. In 2015, President Muhammadu Buhari appointed him as his chief of staff when he was elected president. Kyari was an influential figure within the Buhari's administration. During the administration's first term, he worked mainly behind the scene to implement the president's agenda.
Hundreds of millions of people in the South have been taken out of poverty. The rural economy is booming. Unskilled people in the cities are today laborers, and at any point, any blending plant you go to, it's a marketplace. That is why people believe in you, regardless of what anybody says.
He was also one of the few officials that had cordial relationships with President Buhari.
We have had instances to talk on one-to-one with him. I take him as a very good man, and he contributed his quota to the development of this country. We'll miss him.
Only Allah can provide who is going to step into it and assist the president as he has done in several quarters.
He died on 17th of April from complications related to COVID-19. Adebola Brooksland Sunday, NTA News.
Now, late Abba Kyari is described as an achiever who worked hard in silence while the successes announced itself. The late chief of staff contributed largely to the development of agriculture under the present administration. And details with Musa Babali.
Players in the Nigeria's agricultural sector of the economy described the late chief of staff to the president, Abba Kyari, as an extraordinary principal officer, full of wisdom and silent achiever. This is based on the innovation introduced by the late chief of staff towards boosting the country's food security.
This shame of importing food, we are putting an end to it.
Some of the innovations contributed by the late Abba Kyari are in areas of fertilizer production, marketing and supply. He championed the introduction of Presidential Fertilizer Initiative that successfully addressed corruption in the input supply.
Abba Kyari is one of the initiators of the PFI, that is Presidential Fertilizer Initiatives, which brings down the price of fertilizer in Nigeria from 10,000 to 5,500.
footprint of the late Bukhari is also noticeable in the Anchor Borrowers program that made Nigeria to be self-sufficient in rice and other staples.
So all these programs towards the diversification of the Nigerian economy away from oil to agriculture goes to his credit and his exemplary leadership that he has displayed in that sector.
So we will miss his fatherly advice in those areas, and we believe that God will give the president the wisdom to find a replacement.
Farmers Associations say when history of Nigeria's agricultural development is being written, the name Bukhari will be in gold. In Abuja, Musa Baba Aliyu, NTA News.
Right, you're still watching the news on NTA International. More reports when we return.
Now believe this corrupting. You know, if you touch black man, if you like, gather the whole Niger, come together, make the cough. Nothing.
Which one you want?
Give me V&D.
I beg, get small pieces.
How much you want to give him?
Give me 200. Take your change now.
You don't want your change.
My people, this coronavirus, na serious matter. May una wash una hands regularly. Come use alcohol-based hand sanitizer. If you no see water, wash your hand. Oh, make una sit down for house. You see this virus, so e no get leg. Now we dey waka kurukere. No waka around make the virus for die. No forget say the betterment of our people. Now for your handy day.
This message is from the Akinfade Foundation in partnership with the National Orientation Agency with support from MacArthur Foundation.
Many thanks for being with us. Now, death rate in Spain declines as the confirmed infected cases top 2.2 million globally. Deborah Bruce Sunday has this and more on Global Update on COVID-19.
Hopkins University tally shows that the number of deaths linked to the novel coronavirus at about 6:50 p.m. Nigerian time has reached 156,104. This is from 2,275,782 confirmed cases, with 582,443 recoveries. The Director General of the World Health Organization, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, said the rapid spread of COVID-19 in Africa over the past week is now worrisome, especially with the current challenge of obtaining test kits.
In the past week, there has been a 51% increase in the number of reported cases in my own continent, Africa, and a 60% increase in the number of reported deaths.
Now to the Middle East, where Iran's health ministry spokesman Ghanush Jampor said the death toll from coronavirus has risen by 73 in the past 24 hours to reach 5,031. For the first time in 68 years of her reign, Britain's Queen Elizabeth has asked that there be no gun salutes to mark her birthday on Tuesday. The United Kingdom currently has 108,692 confirmed cases and 14,576 deaths. Meanwhile, China has mandated all key public workers leaving Wuhan, the origin of the virus, to be tested. This was after the country reported 27 new confirmed cases of coronavirus, including 13 Chinese nationals who had returned recently from Russia. Talking about violating lockdown measure, over 100,000 people gathered at the funeral of a renowned Bangladeshi Islamic preacher, Ansari, breaking the lockdown order that the government of the South Asian nation imposed to avert the threats of coronavirus pandemic. I am Adebola Brooksland Sunday.
All right, we have joining us now Dr Moten Ray, Adetola, Assistant Professor of Medicine from the University of Saskatchewan, Canada, to talk more on the COVID-19 situation over there. Glad to have you on the news.
Yeah, thank you so much, and happy to see. Thank you for inviting me.
As it were. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Coronavirus pandemic. Hello, can you hear me? If you can hear me, I've been asking with what has been happening globally. What's your own view as to the global response to this coronavirus pandemic?
Well, I mean, there is no doubt the world by and large has responded after the initial mistakes which were made because there was not enough information, and we did not understand at the onset the kind of disease and the nature of this virus and the pandemic that obviously we were dealing with. But we've obviously learned in the last 1 or 2 months, and there's been a large rally in trying to understand these, and we've dealt with it clearly. And as you can see, the doubling rate of this disease has begun to go down. If you look at the trend in the last 3-4 weeks, the doubling rate, which was initially, at least in the northern part of the world, in North America, USA, Canada, which was about 1 every 3 days, has now declined to about 1 every 10 to 11 days. So I think we're doing a good job of it, at least in this part of the world.
Okay, so how is the situation there in Canada? Can you give us a little bit of insight?
Absolutely. Canada is a nation that has a population of about 38 million people. And we have about 32,000 confirmed cases for a population of 38 million people. And I hope you're hearing me.
Okay, so even though the World Health Organization seemed to, be pointing towards Africa for being the next epicenter, why is it ravaging more of the developed countries at the moment?
Oh yeah, well that's a very easy thing. What happens is, as you know, this seems to be spread more by contact, and the people in the northern hemisphere, they travel a lot. You know very well, the epicenter of this was in China, it started at least from Wuhan, China, and not Americans, Canadians, Americans, the Europeans, they travel a lot. They certainly travel more than those of us in Africa. So there's a lot of travel. And so obviously what happened was a lot of people traveled to China. And so the people, because of the travel, between Europe and North America, as well as Asia, there was a lot of travel that happened, especially December, January, February. And because of traveling, the world has become a very small place. A lot of transmission happened that way at the time that we didn't quite understand the nature of this disease. And that was exactly what happened here. So we did not curtail in time this plague, and it spread very, very early on. And that's what happened. And that's why places like Italy, which didn't close down its borders because of this to this plague, they were hard hit. New York, for instance, which also did not respond in time, they got hit. And that's why you have all the large numbers and the number of deaths that's climbed. If you look at Canada itself, if you cut it down by provinces, large provinces like Quebec and Ontario, they have massive numbers. Quebec, for instance, they have over 14,000 people that were hit. Ontario, they have about 8,000 people. But the province which
developing countries, especially Nigeria, guard against being ravaged by the pandemic.
Where there's a lot of traveling, and especially international travel, they have about 15,000 cases. So you got to look at places where there's a lot of travel. If you look in the United States also, states where they don't have a lot of international travel, they don't have high cases. But when you look at states on the East Coast, Florida, New York, New Jersey, you have thousands and thousands of cases. So it's got to do with international travel. That's the point I'm trying to make.
All right, so Doc, I was asking earlier, how can developing countries, especially Nigeria, guard against being ravaged by the pandemic?
Well, one of the things we can do, and we had better start doing very early, is we have to increase the testing. In my small province of Saskatchewan, we have a population of 1 million. And we've done about 30,000 tests already for a population of 1 million. Nigeria, with 200 million people, they've done only about 7,000 testing as of date. So we need to start testing people who are exposed, and then we need to continue on the contact tracing. I know they're doing a good job of contact tracing. The Nigerian Center for Disease Control is doing an awesome job of contact tracing. I was in Nigeria back in February, and I was impressed, with that was at the time that the coronavirus thing had not yet become a thing, really. That was in early February. But at the ports of entry at the time, maybe because of the Ebola virus that we had back in 2014, they had set in place, the temperature monitoring and all that stuff. And that was a good thing that was a remnant and a carryover from the Ebola virus. But more than that, the testing has to be ramped up. Especially for those who have been exposed, we have to do testing. I know it's costly, but lives are also costly. So we do massive testing, we do very serious contact tracing, and we have to do a lot of public service announcements and information to the population that this is a very deadly disease, and physical or whatever, or social distancing, whatever name that we've decided.
Dr. Moten Ray Adetola, we want to thank you very much for joining us on the news at 7 on NTA International. We've been speaking with the Assistant Professor of Medicine, University of Saskatchewan, Canada. Many thanks for being with us. And now to other stories. The Armed Forces of Nigeria, through the Air Task Force of Operation Lafia Dole, has neutralized several Boko Haram terrorists and destroyed a logistic facility within the heart of Sambisa Forest in Borno State. In a statement by Coordinator, Directorate of Defense Media Operations, Major General John Enenche, this was achieved in an air interdiction mission executed on the 16th of April 2020 as part of ongoing operations to destroy the terrorist capabilities before they could be used against land forces and other targets. The airstrike was conducted after a series of night intelligence which confirmed that makeshift structures hidden under the dense vegetation of the area were being used by the terrorists to store their logistics as well as house their fighters. Now, the Air Task Force dispatched its fighter jets to attack the hideout, leading to the destruction of some of the structures as well as the killing of several terrorists. Post-striking battle damage assessment showed the logistics facility engulfed in flames. And that's our package on the news at 7 on NTA International. Many thanks for watching. I'm Chimobi Walter Naji. Good evening.
Fellow Nigerians, follow the instructions on social distancing. The irresponsibility of the few can lead to the death of many. Your freedom ends where other people's rights begin. The security agencies have risen to the challenges posed by this.
Governor explains.